This story is no longer just about one allegation, and that changes everything. Timothy Busfield, a well-known television actor and director, is now facing multiple accusations, reported in official court filings, spanning different years, different locations, and different families. What makes this moment significant isn't speculation or social media reaction. It's the timeline, the newly surfaced claims, and the question prosecutors are now asking the court. Does this represent a broader pattern, or isolated allegations being misinterpreted? And buried inside a newly filed motion is one detail that few people noticed: a claim involving a parent, a request for therapy, and a decision that would later resurface years afterward. The arrest that reopened the past. On January 13, Timothy Busfield surrendered himself to the Albuquerque Police Department after a warrant was issued for his arrest. According to publicly available court documents, prosecutors charged Busfield with 2 counts of criminal sexual contact of a minor and 1 count of child abuse related to an alleged incident involving twin boys who were 11 years old at the time of reporting. Busfield has publicly denied the allegations, stating in a recorded video that he intends to fight the charges and prove his innocence. At this stage, these are charges, not convictions, and the legal process is still unfolding. But within 24 hours of that surrender, prosecutors filed something that shifted the case in a new direction. The pretrial motion that changed the narrative. On January 14, prosecutors submitted a pretrial detention motion requesting that Busfield remain in custody while awaiting trial. These motions are not routine. They are typically filed when the state believes release could pose a risk or when additional context is considered relevant to a judge's decision. Inside this filing, prosecutors referenced a newly reported allegation. Not a new charge, but a report that had allegedly occurred years earlier, in a different state, involving a different family. And that's where the story widened. A claim from years earlier. According to the motion, a man identified as Colin Swift contacted law enforcement on January 13. He told investigators that his daughter, who was 16 years old at the time of the alleged incident, had reported inappropriate conduct involving Busfield years earlier while auditioning at a theater in Sacramento, California. The filing states that the allegation involved non-graphic, non-explicit physical contact, as described by the reporting party. Crucially, the document also claims that Busfield allegedly asked the family not to contact police, instead requesting that he be allowed to seek therapy. Swift, described in the filing as a therapist himself, reportedly believed at the time that this approach was appropriate. No charges were filed in that case. No court proceedings followed. And until now, the allegation remained outside the public record. Why this matters legally? It's important to pause here, because this is where many stories go wrong. This new allegation does not automatically establish guilt, and prosecutors are not presenting it as such. Instead, it appears in the context of a detention argument, meaning the state is using it to argue risk assessment, not to secure an immediate conviction. In plain terms, the court is being asked to consider whether multiple reports across time should influence decisions about release conditions. That distinction matters, and it's why careful language is critical. The original investigation. The initial charges stem from allegations involving twin boys, whose identities are protected due to their age. According to the arrest warrant, the boys met Busfield while he was directing episodes of a television series. Their parents later sought medical and professional guidance after concerns were raised. The warrant states that healthcare professionals and counselors later described the children as having potentially experienced grooming behavior, based on their disclosures and emotional responses. Investigations began, paused, resumed, and were ultimately reevaluated over time. This timeline is complex, and that complexity matters. Why the case took years? According to court records, early reports did not immediately meet prosecutorial thresholds. That does not mean nothing happened. It means authorities at the time determined they lacked sufficient evidence to proceed. Later disclosures, therapy records, and additional statements reportedly led investigators to revisit the case. This is not uncommon in cases involving minors, where disclosures may evolve as children mature and feel safer speaking. Again, this does not determine outcome. It explains process. Busfield's response. Before surrendering, Busfield released a video stating that the accusations were false and that he intended to fight them in court. He described the claims as lies and said he was confident in eventual exoneration. Public statements like this are not unusual, and they are not evidence. They represent one side of a legal dispute that will now play out in court. Additional context from the past. Court documents also reference previous allegations over the decades, including claims that were investigated but not prosecuted, or that were resolved through civil processes. In each instance, outcomes differed. Some cases were dismissed. Some were settled. Some were deemed lacking sufficient evidence. This does not establish a conclusion, but it does form the background prosecutors are now asking the court to consider. Why prosecutors are asking for detention? In their filing, prosecutors argue that the combination of allegations suggests a potential risk if Busfield were released pending trial. They emphasize the concept of pattern, while carefully noting that each allegation stands on its own legally. Defense attorneys are expected to strongly contest this interpretation. And ultimately, it will be a judge, not public opinion, who decides how this proceeds. What happens next? The court will now review the detention request, the credibility and admissibility of referenced allegations, the defense's response, and whether conditions short of detention could be appropriate. None of these steps determine guilt. They determine process. And process matters for everyone involved. This case is still unfolding, and its outcome will depend on evidence, testimony, and the legal standards applied, not headlines or assumptions. What's clear is that this is no longer a single allegation under review, but a broader legal question about how past reports, newly surfaced claims, and procedural decisions intersect. In the next video, we'll break down how pretrial detention motions actually work, why prosecutors file them, and what judges look for when deciding whether someone stays in custody before trial. If you want to understand how these decisions are made, not just what's being alleged, that's where we're going next. Thanks for watching.